for everybody there, welcome to my book. It's been a major part of my life for the last 10 years, and one of my proudest accomplishments. As Steve mentioned, my dad Russell wrote three books for Oxford University Press called "American Popular Music and Its Business: The First 400 Years." Popular music in America started in the when Francis Drake touched down and above San Francisco Bay back in the 1480s. And he was a musician, and his whole crew were musicians. And they were about to circumnavigate the globe. And they sat on the shore and had dinner, played music, and the Native Americans joined them. It was the first time English language music had ever been heard in North America. Just a little fact there about where history of music in America began. Well, there we are with myself, Steve, and legend Steve Cropper of the Blues Brothers, Stax Records. He wrote Sitting on the Dock of the Bay with Otis Redding. This is a first for Delta State. You all are the first to have this book in a college program to use in your curriculum. I think that's a milestone for Delta State. And I want to thank the Steve Azar St. Cecilia Foundation and thank Paul Mathis for getting these books to you. At Delta State, you're very fortunate to have an interdepartmental synergy for your career in the music industry. You're studying the industry itself at Delta State in the Delta Music Institute, but your other departments there, your business administration, marketing, digital technology, computer information services, provide more tools that you will need in the music industry. The music industry is now driven by streaming, which is driven by technology. There are approximately 7 trillion streams tracked, accounted for, and paid to the writers and artists, publishers, and record companies every in 2023 and 2024. So technology has become the target, the stream for money as well as the stream for music between consumers and the creators of music. As I said, consumer spending fuels the music business. The money that you all spend works its way to the artists and songwriters after it flows through a matrix that we call the music industry. They fund, they hire, they fund, they do the work, they do the promotion, they do the management of the creative people to get the music from the creators to the public, and they profit along the way. There's a lot of rumors going about how people don't get paid, about streaming doesn't pay. None of this is true. Streaming is the most organized aspect of the music industry in terms of information and the flow of information. As I said, 7 trillion streams a year are tracked. That's 800 million streams an hour. Hour, every day of the year are tracked and paid for to the creators of music once the money has passed from the consumers through the music business to the creators. Now, that's just the streaming aspect, which is part of the record business revenue. 16 to 25% of the money that comes to the record companies goes to artists as royalties. And that includes streaming, records, downloads, any revenue that the record companies receive. They're contractually obligated to pay that amount of money to their artists. Now, when an artist plays live, of course, you have two types of artists playing live. You have the huge, big superstars like Taylor Swift and Drake and Beyonce. And then you have the people like some of you probably are out there playing in clubs, playing for the door, or just playing for your friends. And there's not a lot of money when you start, but if you get to the top, there can be. And generally, about 34% of money from a concert sits in the pocket of the artist. So when Taylor Swift made $2 billion on her tour, that means that she netted out about $680 million, which is a pretty nice day's work. Songwriters do even better. When a songwriter becomes popular and successful, he or she can renegotiate the contract to get 75% of the gross revenue. They have to pay an administration fee before that, but 75% of that net will go to the hit songwriters. Now, if you're an independent artist or an independent songwriter who own your own rights, you of course get 100% of the money. So that's for you who out there who are artists. You can start as an independent. You can then choose to stay as an independent, or if a little luck, you might get signed to a label. Here's a explanation of where the money goes that consumers spend. Now, in 2019, which was the year before COVID, of course, COVID 2020 was the live performance industry shut down for the last 9 months of the year. So the amount of money, the amount of earnings were greatly reduced. But if we look at this slide, we see that recorded music is about 15% of what consumers spend. Printed music, and that includes digital downloads of sheet music or tablature, or the how to play wonderful uh, programs that they now have online. Um, that's a little under 5%. The major concerts do $11 billion a year. When we say major concerts, we mean coliseums, arenas, amphitheaters. Then the smaller venues are smaller theaters, clubs, all kinds of places, cruise ships, civic meetings. There's all kinds of places that music is played and the musicians get paid for their appearance. That includes in the other shows roughly match the gross of the major concerts, about 11 billion each. Then there are associated costs for live performance for the consumer, which include parking, concessions, handling fees from the ticket master, and then there's also the ticket resale market. I don't know if you guys know much about that, but when you hear that someone bought a ticket to a concert for $2,000, but the face value of the ticket was only 150, well, that's the ticket resale market, and as you can see, that's a pretty big business also. Now, the $46.2 billion in 2019 had grown from 24.6 billion in 2007. So in those 12 years, the amount of money that consumers spend on music almost doubled.
Hey, Rick, before you go there, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Paul, for either one of y'all. So is that not considered scalping? I mean, how's that allowed for tickets to get bought up in such bulk? Paul, what do you
Well, scalping is an old term that goes back to the 1800s that applied to people buying and reselling railroad tickets.
What's the
if you can
difference?
imagine. Scalping for a long time before digital technology, people bought tickets and stood outside the theater and held them and waved them up in the air and said, "Who wants tickets?"
Yeah.
Things got more sophisticated when computer programs came in. So now uh, the market has developed a what the consumer will pay will get one way or the other, but the secondary ticketing market doesn't share the revenue with the artist. So it's considered scalping by the industry. It's a difficult issue, Steve. There's some laws about it in New York and California and some of the other major states, but it's something the industry is constantly trying to deal with. And how do we uh, how do we police this, and how do we deal with people who are willing to pay that money? The artists, however, don't want to think that they're gouging the public. So it's a sensitive issue. It's constantly looked at. There are constant hearings in Congress about it, but it still goes on. But scalping is what it had been called before the digital age.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, just a week ago, on I think it was 60 Minutes, there was a detailed explanation and description of just how this issue has developed, and principally what these secondary markets do is they have algorithms, and they figure out how to buy blocks of tickets. For instance, when you go online and you try to buy 2 tickets or 4 tickets, and they say that's the max. Well, they've gotten around that, and they figure out how to do that. But that, you know, every issue of 60 Minutes, you can go back and look at the segment, and if you put in the segment on ticket resales, it's a good thing to watch because they go through all of this, and I think the largest, for instance, even 60%, I think that's correct. 60% of all concerts are controlled by one agency. Am I right on that, Rick?
Is that Live Nation?
Well, it's actually 80% controlled by Ticketmaster.
Yeah,
Ticketmaster.
Live Nation. Yeah. So,
And yeah,
yeah.
Live Nation and Ticketmaster merged in 2011.
Yeah.
Wow.
In 2016, there was the Anti-Bot Act because these are computer bots.
Yeah.
Your computer students there probably know more about bots than I do, but there are ways to buy a whole bunch of tickets instantly and get online in front of everybody who's individual consumers. And there was under the Obama administration, 2016, there was an act passed against it, but it's been hard to implement it. And the other problem is the public keeps buying them that way.
Oh, yeah.
The public hasn't boycotted the secondary market, so it's a difficult thing uh, to do. They can complain about it, but they keep paying the price.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Now, what it does, it hurts the people with less income because they can't compete with they can't pay $2,000 for a ticket.
mm-mm.
But you know what? There's a lot of great acts out there that you can go see at any time that you can get at a reasonable price.
Okay. Roll on.
Hey, Rick,
Or Charlie.
this is Charlie.
Charlie, hi.
I'm not actually on stage right now. I'm sitting out so I can see you. As long as we're on the subject of ticketing, and it stopped me if you were planning to talk about this later on. But, you know, we all know that when you buy a ticket from Ticketmaster, which is a part of Live Nation, you're going to pay this gigantic fee just for buying a ticket for a show that Live Nation is probably producing in the first place. And they probably own the venue and the artist and the tickets, which kind of a monopoly sort of a thing, yet they can still charge $25, $50 fees to buy a ticket. Do you see that changing in the near future?
There's been talk about breaking up Live Nation, that it is a monopoly, and under definitions of monopoly, it is. Uh, it actually is a responsible monopoly. Um, they do all this in coordination with the artists and the artist management in planning the tours. In fact, the tours are all planned on computer down to what food is in the dressing room, what price hotel room the artist can afford in order to make that 34% profit. It's all rotates around that. Um, the money, of course, when we talk about that, we're talking about on the face value of the tickets. The money that is in the secondary market supposedly is not shared with the artists at all, and the artists therefore say, well, we want reasonable ticket prices for our fans. But there's a lot of talk about the artists are sharing in it in different ways under the table, and it's gotten to be an issue that Congress is concerned about, that consumer protection groups are concerned about. But again, I said there's enough people to keep buying the tickets. So how do you deal with that? Um, let's say that they did do away with the secondary market. Well, then Taylor Swift tickets, instead of $2,000 to the secondary market, would be $2,000 to the primary market because there's enough people who will pay that amount of money. So the general public is basically priced out of seeing the top artists unless they can save their money and buy a ticket. Is that going to change? Possibly, but it's a hard change to make.
Well, you know, Ticketmaster, of course, can sell a ticket to a Steve Azar concert. And then if it sells out and they go to the secondary market, Ticketmaster, of course, has a secondary market. They can sell the same ticket 2 or 3, even more times. and make money and charge fees on top of that every
Well,
time.
true. And Ticketmaster owns 50% of the secondary market. But you know, there's another element too, is that there's a group of individual ticket buyers, maybe as much as 10% of the market, who speculate on tickets themselves and then resell them on the secondary market and make a profit. So it's a complex issue. Um, it's nothing's going to be done till enough of the public stands up and complains.
Yeah, yeah, that's true, Rick, because that particular issue that was on TV showed guys working in their home got together to go into this market and make money, and one guy made $10,000 on one concert
Yeah,
for resales.
Wow. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like the music business is always the last one to get the things fixed. We'll talk about that at another time, but we've always been a little late for the party. It just seems what common sense just doesn't, you know? I mean, we were the beginning, our hits came with Napster, and they sent us DC. It was me and Sean Colvin. We were one of the most illegally downloaded records of Napster. And we didn't know what it was until Jason and I and Chris, I think we went to an apartment and had a lot of the Ivy League, Rutgers. And we'd been invited to houses. And finally we said, we knew that people were coming to the shows and they were singing every word to every song. And at that point, we only had 2 singles out. And we were going like, how's this happening? But there was no record sales in the market. But yet everybody was coming to the shows and it was a lot of people. And I remember some of the club owners and theater owners going, we've never seen these people. So we were not having your P1 country listeners. We were having people that were. And so we finally went to an apartment, looked like our apartment at Delta State, had a bing bag, a dog, you know, and nothing else. And but they go, this is where we're downloading your music. And I said, what is that? I'll never forget calling Luke Lewis because he was asking, you know, how's it going? And I told him about it, Rick. And Rick, he said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. That's nothing. I'm like, I'm telling you. And he goes, then he got to the point where he got so upset. He goes, if I hear another thing about that, then you're out of here. Like he was just mad. I was telling him what was going on in the real world. But Jason, right? Chris, we all went through that. So, and then it happened. And, you know, so I feel like we're always just really late to the party.
well, the record
And you
labels,
deal on the legal side of it.
the record
So
labels
you're
certainly relate to the
involved
party.
in that as well. But you're also on the creative side, Paul, as well. You're both.
Steve,
Yeah, I see both sides, and it's true. Used to
the
New York.
the record labels
Yeah.
relate to the party, Steve, as
Yeah.
you said about Luke. Luke, for our audience, Luke Lewis was the gentleman who ran Steve's label in Nashville, where Steve had a #1 record. And if he's running a label that has a #1 record, he ought to know a little bit about his business. And you
Yeah,
can't
he did not.
imagine, can't
He was
blame
just
Steve
owned
for
all the
being
time.
upset. But that was rampant in the music business. They let Napster sneak up on them because they didn't pay attention to what the consumers were paying attention to.
Yeah.
And that was the first instance of the consumers getting in front of the record companies on how to consume music. And it cost the record business half of its revenue for the next 10 years because everybody was downloading through Napster and then subsequent file sharing sites. And it just kept growing until Apple came by and did downloads. And then Spotify actually brought the solution to the problem in 2011. And that's where we are now. We're in a world of streaming that is totally automated and totally regulated, and everybody gets paid.
Yeah. Good.
But
Paul was going to say something, Rick.
Well, no. I was just going to say it reminds me of my trips to New York City, and you can buy every CD you want on the street.
yeah, when they look at a book like the size of my book, and they say, well, why do we read about the past? We're living in the present. We want to know what's happening now.
Yeah.
And well, aside from your musical talents and your skills as a person and dealing with other people, the most important thing in the music business, as well as any business, is to know how that business operates. The way you learn how a business operates is you learn the history. so you can understand the present, what's going on, what people are doing, and that way you can prepare for the future as you continue to learn and grow. It's in any business you go into, it's a lifetime of gaining knowledge in order to succeed. One of the other key elements in the business is, who do you know, and who will you know for the rest of your career? Because in personal contact is one of the major forms of communication in the music industry, as it is in many industries that depend upon dealing with the consumer and with the public, and not selling products, but selling entertainment. But now look around your room. The people that are in your classes with you and your program with you, many of them may be in your career for the rest of your life. If they go the same path you do and you do go into the music business, then they'll know people that you'll meet, you'll know people that they'll meet, and you build a base of contacts that will be your network. And you build your network, and it leads to being at a company. You join a team at that company, and the whole success is based upon teamwork. Just like a band playing on stage, the band isn't good if their teamwork isn't good. Well, the same is true at a record company. The teamwork makes it sell records and get songs on the radio, now on streaming. So you'll need to know your teammates, but always also be aware of their strengths and weaknesses. And then again, also know your own. Now there's a team. How about that team in the bottom corner there? Um, they're all great stars, but they're also teammates. So how do you use this book to expand your knowledge? The book is divided into three parts: 1985 to 95. Now, 95 was the year that 95, 96 is when the internet opened up. Internet actually opened up for commerce in November 1994, and also when the MP3 was first introduced. So that was a pivotal year. I had to divide the book some way into sections, so I chose that as a an important mark. Then in 2006, between 2006 and 2007, that's when the smartphone came out. The both the Apple iPhone and the Android technology came out, and suddenly music switched to the phone, and now we all listen to music on our phones. We do everything on our phones. The smartphone has taken over technology. It's, as Steve Jobs said when he introduced the iPhone, it's a computer in your pocket, and it's become that computer in your pocket today is a more powerful computer that was on your desk in 2007. So it's amazing how technology has grown. So each set of the three sections of the book has 5 chapters. The first is about the record business and how the companies, how they evolved, their successes, their failures, and how they move through the roller coaster ride that is the music industry from 1985 through 2019. And then the second one talks about the relationship. The second chapter, back when records and retail and radio, that's how records were sold. The records played on the radio got sold at your local store, and the record companies kept putting records in the market for sale as long as they were on the charts. So the charts, which changed every week and still change every week, there's a new number one record most weeks. Um, the charts are the glue that runs the industry. Every Monday afternoon, everybody looks to see what's the chart, what's on the chart this week, what's the new number one, what's in the top 10, and that dictates to a large degree how we consume our music. The third chapters are about publishing, copyright, and legislation and litigation that involve them. The fourth chapter is about the creators of music, how and how much they get paid. The great artists of the last 40 years, their tours, their major records, and a lot of other information about them. Then finally, the last chapter, number fifth chapter, is about you, the consumers. How do you influence the industry? How do you spend your money on music? and how do you interact with digital technology? And when I say you, I mean all of us. And I think we're all music consumers. Us, me on the screen, and the man on the stage. We consume music too. So our first common bond is that we're consumers of music, and some of us, like Steve, have moved on to become creators of music as well. Whereas I moved on, and Paul moved on to be in the business of music, and Richard and moved on to and Justin moved on to teach about it. So, but we're all still in the music business. We're all part of the music business because without consumers, there wouldn't be a music business. Although the book is imposing, as some of our panelists said earlier, being large at 631 pages, it's a resource for you for your studies and hopefully beyond your studies. I like to look at the table of contents as the roadmap, where I can find a specific subject to recommend to people to read about. And then in the index is the GPS coordinates that tell you where that subject is. Between the chapters and the prologue and the epilogue, which covers solely the year 2020, about the influence of COVID on the entire music industry. The book has 238 subchapters that each are a story unto themselves, and such as a TikTok phenomenon, which is certainly from your age, of your part of the music industry. TikTok didn't start till 2018, so that's quite new. The COVID year, when COVID closed the concert circuit, as Steve probably remembers, March 15, 2020, everybody was told to get off the road, go home, everything's closed, and stayed that way for a year and a half, and for some places even more.
Except in South Dakota, just FYI.
Okay.
Anyway.
Then the Music Modernization Act of 2018 tells the story of how a streaming royalty stream was set up. The Napster Chronicles, we were just talking about Napster, how they revolutionized the music business, but were put out of business by the music business. Then, of course, Spotify, which we've also mentioned, and probably a great number of you use, they invented and created the solution for streaming to where it became to dominate the entire industry. I also have created 30 full-page charts and graphics. In fact, the pie chart that we saw a few slides ago of consumer spending in 2019 is one of those pages. Now, if you this is following the dollar. And the source of this information comes from the RIAA, the Recording Industry Association of America, which is the lobbying group for the record company and their trade association. And they're the people that issue the gold and platinum records that you hear so much about. That Steve, you got a wall full of them, don't you? And the U.S. labeled revenue, as you can see, from 2007, it was at 10.7 billion, and then it declined as people stopped buying records and just started listening to streaming, and then it grew. Then, as when Apple entered the streaming business in 2015, streaming took over. It boomed. I like to call it the streaming tsunami, and swept across the music industry, and it's still sweeping across the music industry, which is now in the U.S. alone going over 20 billion a year, probably this year. You can also see the decline in CDs, the decline in then renaissance and revival in vinyl. There you can see the average album price, and that price has gone up now because of the cost of vinyl, because the only thing that's being sold physically anymore is vinyl. There's still a few download sales, but vinyl has had a great comeback in the last 10 years. And you see album sales dominated the industry until 2023, because it's all streaming, and streaming is all singles. So here's what the record business looked like in 2023. Again, streaming. 84% of U.S. record revenue is streaming, and that comes from two places. That comes from the subscriptions that you pay for if you're on a a a premium subscription with Spotify or Apple, and you pay. It was $9.99 a month. I think it's gone up to $11 or $12 now. But 84% of the revenue comes from those streaming subscriptions, the pay subscriptions, then also the freemium subscriptions where you don't pay, but you have advertising, and the advertising pays. And that's you have Spotify has a freemium level, and YouTube still has a lot of freemium level, and they of course have advertising on there too. So the money comes into the record business either directly from the consumer or from the commercials that a consumer has to listen to when he's listening to streaming, which is sort of like the way radio was, because radio was totally driven by advertising dollars. Now, it's really interesting, the trend for independent artists. Independent artists now own over 40% of the worldwide market. Steve, for instance, is an independent artist. He has his own label, and he sells his records and or receives his money from streaming as a label. And he and all the other independents are gaining ground over the record companies. And worldwide, it's up to 40%. In the U.S., it's a little less. Now, consumers are more empowered than ever because you don't have to wait till a record company gets a record on the radio in your market, and then it gets into the store and you can go buy it, because you can just stream it the second you want. So the record companies are more interested in you, the consumer, than they ever were. They used to dictate what you had to listen to. Now every record ever recorded is available to you through streaming, and that's over 50 million records. So that's puts a great deal of power in the hands of consumers, which I think is a very positive move for the industry.
You guys understand sync, right? You've been taught that, right? Sync licensing, right? Therefore, you TV, commercials, film. It could be a big chunk. It really is very helpful if you're an independent label, Rick and Paul.
Yeah.
Been very beneficial to me for sure. And that's a huge help, but it's only 2% of the market. But that 2% can be pretty vast for an independent.
That's 2% of $18 billion.
Yeah. Paul,
that can be a big payday, if you will, especially if you get tied into a movie.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, Steve and I wrote a song that got in a movie on the Hallmark Channel, and we still receive royalties for it.
Yeah, a good example that the most well-used song of the Spinners was Rubber Band Man.
Yeah.
They hated to record that. They didn't like the song at all, but it's in 2 or 3 movies.
Yeah.
And it's go gangbusters. And every time that movie plays, they get paid.
Yeah. Let me give an example. Hey, Rick, remember
Yeah.
Jason's here right now, and Jason had to go in because the actor couldn't sing well in the Hallmark movie, and Jason had to go in and sort of sing over him, and it's Jason's voice sort of dominating when the actor couldn't sing. Like they hired an actor that couldn't sing. Isn't that crazy? Right, Rick? Remember we did that?
Yeah.
And then, so that's interesting. But let me give y'all an example. So I have a couple Sony Pictures films. Here Comes the Boom and Mall Cop 2.
Mm-hmm.
I originally wrote Fly for the 2015 Alpine World Ski Championships. So got paid a chunk of money to record it. They paid for all of the recordings, the orchestra, everything, and gave me 100% rights, paid me to perform on NBC, gave me a week's vacation with my family that the rooms were like $2,000 a night. And then Kevin James heard it and made it the feature track in Mall Cop 2. So that was a double whammy. But to give you an example, out of nowhere, that movie was out how many years ago? Years ago. Yeah. And then our BMI statement, a couple 3 months ago, all it said was Mall Cop 2 Fly Brazil. And it was $20,000 out of nowhere. And like going like, where's 20,000? What does Brazil mean? I guess they finally have the movie in Brazil.
Oh, yeah.
And so there you go. But every once in a while you see, but this is way after the fact of the money that we made. So sync licensing, important, guys. I'm telling you. For all right reasons. Anyway, okay, sorry.
Now, when I say the top artists are top businessmen, you just heard from one of them, Steve Azar, because his skills as a businessman and an entrepreneur are as sizable as his skill as an entertainer. In fact, he should be the entrepreneur in residence at Delta State as well as the entertainer in residence.
I think it's called survival, Rick.
Yeah,
Survival. Yeah.
but you wrote the book on it, Steve.
Yeah.
And now, as I said earlier, digital technology has allowed us access to virtually all the records ever made. And what's wonderful about that is you as young people might discover a record that was made 50 years ago, and you didn't know it was made 50 years ago because you heard it for the first time last week. So it's given all music an equal platform, and that's um, great for artists of all ages.
Hey, real quick, before Charlie and I, we've talked about this in class a while back, and we were talking about the advantage of sync. Besides the money, I mean, you do this because you love it. The money follows, but with that said, it also brings attention to your song. So if it's in a commercial or if it's in a hit TV show, you look at shows like Cheers in our time, Friends, Grey's Anatomy. I mean, they broke records, like, right, Charlie? We've talked about. So that's the benefit. If you can land a sync in something that is owned over and over, and now y'all got TikTok and everything else, so you don't have to have it in the ultimate hit TV series. It can just be heard a zillion times on TikTok through a small commercial, but it draws people to your music and in turn to that song and in turn to you. Yeah. And when that happens, game on.
Not only that, Spotify is real good at this. They'll take, you can put in a search, you can put in, you say you want to put in jazz, and maybe you want to put in vocals, and they have already set it up so that you will hear vocals in jazz, and they will pick songs probably that you've never heard of, put it in that compilation, that playlist. It's playlist, and that generates income for artists who you probably never heard of, or and so that's done all the time, all the time. Spotify does it, Pandora does it, and
Apple.
these other streaming, yeah, and they all do it.
Google Play and all that. Yeah. Stitcher. Yep.
I want to interject for just 1 second too. There's a great tool that probably everybody uses called Shazam,
Yeah.
and I use it all the time. If I hear a song on TV or if I'm at a store, I just Shazam it, and I know who it is, where it is, what album it is, how to get it, and so the digital part of this has made it so easy to find music and to buy it.
And it stores it, right, Richard? It stores it when you
Yes.
Shazam it, it's there, so you don't have to go write it down or whatever.
Yep. So 2 days later, you can go back and see that list and go, oh yeah, I got to get that song.
Yeah.
Hey, keep in mind that there's another side to that picture too, from aside just the songwriter and performers. Remember that there are people out there that have to find that music and book that music, and music supervisors in movies. And, if you happen to want to be in that part of the industry, but you're not a songwriter, there's the other side that, the people that have to buy that kind of entertainment and that kind of music and stuff. And you might want to consider the possibility of being on that side of the fence.
Taking that to the next step, the A&R departments at record companies used to go out to see live music, used to go to clubs to hear the latest bands. Now they get online to look for the statistics of bands that are getting played locally. So if they see someone who has a large amount of streams in Cleveland, Mississippi, an unusual amount of streams, and they've never heard of him, they say, "Wow, this guy must be popular locally because look at all the streams he's getting. We need to go see him." That's a way of being found as a new artist. Is you build your local base, you build a fan base, you get them to stream your music, you create playlists of your own music, and so your fans will go to your playlists and put that on, and your streams will build and will draw attention to you. Well, here's your the streaming services that were top rated in 2023, and you can see Spotify is the top one, and Apple, then Tencent, which is the Chinese. This is a worldwide, uh, and YouTube is growing as a streaming service. It's the fastest growing one, and but this is now the world. We're in a streaming world, and stream, of course, the difference between a stream and radio is that a stream is one track listened to once, whether it's on demand or part of a playlist. Whereas a radio broadcast was one song broadcast on radio, not on demand, but hundreds or thousands of people or tens of thousands of people could be listening to that radio broadcast at the same time. So it's so in looking at when artists and songwriters talk about their royalties, and that streaming doesn't pay as much as radio. Well, overall, streaming pays more than radio. It's just got a different way of tracking it. It's more exact in tracking, and it's one on one. It's an actual consumer requesting and listening to that record. And each stream itself has digital identifiers that track it for royalty accounting. And here again, as I said, over 7 trillion, said earlier, 7 trillion music streams, video and audio combined, which includes YouTube, were accounted for globally in 2024, which is an amazing amount of music. And all that is tracked. All of that is on the data sheets. All of it goes through the Mechanical Licensing Collective, which was established by the Music Modernization Act of 2018, which is empowered by the government to the governments around the world. This is a worldwide effort to accurately pay for music that is listened to by consumers. Now, we mentioned TikTok, and I don't know if all of you understand just how big TikTok is. Last year, there were 1.6 billion people use TikTok on a monthly basis. So it's huge. It's become it's led the way in creating the interactive or expanding the interactive relationship between creators and consumers. Because as you all know, who probably use TikTok a lot more than I do, that you can join a TikTok challenge to where you can create your own dance to a song. And an article that I quoted in my book said that 40 years ago, when the days of MTV, the MTV viewers remember the video of the song. Where today's of TikTok, they're going to remember the consumer dance more than they're going to remember the artist. So it's a way of getting artists and the consumer closer together, which has become a focus of the record companies. How do we find and how do we profit, of course, off of these super consumers and these consumer music fans, and how do we cater to them and give them more of what they want? Thank you, everybody, for putting
I
up with
love it.
me.
Everybody, it's Rick Sanjek, everybody.